With more than 600 confirmed cases of COVID-19 now in 36 states and the District of Columbia, the U.S. is ramping up its measures to contain the spread of COVID-19. So, what does this mean for our long shared border and the free movement of people and goods between our two countries? With a closer look, I'm now joined by Mark Warner, who is an international trade lawyer. Mark, always great to talk to you. Thanks for being on the program. Could we see a big decision to close the entire border, or at the very least, close particular sections, say the border between Washington State and British Columbia, or the area closest to New Rochelle, New York?
I don't think it's likely that we'll see a blanket closing of the border anytime soon. You know, the outbreak, so far at least, is a lot less acute here in Canada than it is in the United States. So I don't think we'd see that, either a blanket closing of the border. I do think we could see, or even pockets in Seattle or wherever it is. I do think we could see more testing of people crossing the border, particularly people coming from other countries, maybe from China, or people who are dual citizens of Canada, who from Iran or from China, who might be coming from other places when they cross into the U.S.
So someone who's coming from Iran stops in Canada and gets in a car and drives across, you could see them being turned around by U.S. border security. I
could see something like that. We could see more of that. We think we've seen some of that already. Or I could see even someone living in Canada who has those two passports and that nationality. This might be a chance. But I don't see a blanket closing of the border. I think the real question is, does it ever get to the truckers, the people who bring things across the border? Will we see more slowing down at the border? That's possible, I think, as well. We haven't seen that in a great sense yet, but that's where I would look for it. I wouldn't look for a blanket closing of the border.
What would it take to get to that point where the borders just get shut?
I think it would take basically a sort of an outbreak in Canada that was uncontained. So if we were to start having more cases in Canada that we couldn't have hospital beds for, something a lot more extreme than what we've seen so far, and I think would have to be something more extreme than what we've seen in the U.S. So I just don't see. I mean, Trump has threatened, that he wants to use this as an opportunity to justify closing of the border, for some things, and his China policy and get tax cuts. I think it's rhetoric to this point, but I do think we could, things about flights flying into the United States, checking people, all of that which is tightened under Trump will continue to tighten. I think he'll use this as an excuse to tighten further, but I don't think we're looking at a blanket closing of the border.
I mean, a blanket closing of the border would affect trade undoubtedly, wouldn't it?
It would. I mean, a lot of parts come across the border for our autos. Think of how many different times those auto parts cross the border.
Yeah.
There's
going back and forth, exactly.
Going back and forth. So that would also hurt the United States. If you look at what happened last night, which is kind of interesting, is that Joe Biden won the state of Michigan. He won in parts of Michigan that are auto country, where Bernie Sanders was going after him for having voted for the original NAFTA. So I think that Trump is going to be looking at the northern states a little bit differently than he might have after last night.
Mark, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. If you like this, be sure to subscribe here.
And you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.